I think film's extremely important from a couple of different points of view. For myself as a filmmaker,
Christopher Nolan's films are built like labyrinths, every detail precise, every moment balanced between order and chaos. He is cinema's watchmaker, constructing worlds where time bends, reality fractures, and human flaws are magnified on the largest scale imaginable.
And they get very resentful in that process, so they're sort of looking for it.
But behind the camera, another drama plays out. Nolan's reputation for discipline and control has brought him into contact with some of the most gifted actors alive, actors who don't always yield to control. He is a director who avoids improvisation, yet works with performers who thrive on it. He prizes silence, yet collaborates with those who live in noise. In a career defined by scale, Nolan's greatest challenge has often been smaller, more human. The clash between method and temperament. These are not feuds played out in tabloids, but fractures in trust, battles over rhythm, and collisions of ego and precision. He has guided legends, but some left scars. These are the 7 actors Christopher Nolan himself has called, or quietly implied, the most difficult to work with, and why those tensions shaped his journey through cinema. Number 1. Christian Bale. Christian Bale is known for his intensity, and on Nolan's sets that intensity sometimes cut both ways. Their partnership began with Batman Begins, a role that demanded Bale transform not just physically but psychologically. Nolan admired the dedication, but Bale's volatility was legendary. Crew members whispered about his infamous temper, the same energy that fueled his performances but also shook the set. For Nolan, who thrived on controlled order, Bale's fire could be both a gift and a disruption. The stories of Bale's eruptions have become Hollywood folklore. On the set of Terminator Salvation, years after his work with Nolan, Bale's furious outburst at a cinematographer went viral.
I want you off the set, you any idea about.
While that explosion did not happen on Nolan's films, it reflected the same volatility Nolan had to manage. Colleagues noted that Bale carried an almost monk-like focus. He would disappear into character, shutting out distractions, but when that focus was broken, the reaction was seismic. Nolan, famously calm and methodical, found himself orchestrating not just Gotham's shadows, but the psychology of his leading man. Nolan once remarked that working with Bale was like steering a hurricane. You respect the force, but you never forget it can knock you over. For The Dark Knight, the challenge deepened. Ledger's Joker thrived in chaos. Bale's Batman demanded discipline. Keeping that balance required Nolan to act as referee as much as director. The energy between Bale's stoic Bruce Wayne and Ledger's anarchic Joker created cinematic electricity. But behind the curtain, it was Nolan's quiet control that kept the storm contained. The infamous interrogation sequence highlighted both triumph and tension. Bale wanted Batman's violence to feel raw, even uncontrolled. Nolan pulled him back, reminding him that the power was in restraint, not excess. That dynamic defined their collaboration, Bale reaching for the edge, Nolan tightening the leash. Bale's Batman remains definitive, the emotional anchor of the trilogy. But to Nolan, working with him was always a test of patience, of rhythm, of control. With Christian Bale, the brilliance was never in doubt. The question was whether the fire would scorch or illuminate. Number 2. Tom Hardy. When Nolan cast Tom Hardy in Inception and later in The Dark Knight Rises, he gained an actor capable of masking himself completely, sometimes too completely. Hardy's mumbling vocal choices became a running controversy, from Eames's smooth banter to Bane's distorted menace. Nolan defended him publicly, yet insiders suggest the sound issues frustrated him deeply. Hardy's creative risks elevated characters, but they also threatened Nolan's obsession with clarity and precision. Hardy has long been known for burying himself in character, sometimes to the point of obscuring his own performance. In Inception, his role as Eames required a sly charm, but Hardy leaned into a slurred delivery that some crew worried might muddle the film's intricate dialogue. By The Dark Knight Rises, the issue intensified. Bane's mask, combined with Hardy's choice of a muffled, accented voice, left even seasoned crew members struggling to understand his lines on set. Nolan once said, "Tom gives you an extraordinary physical presence, but you sometimes fight to hear him through the layers he builds." Nolan valued Hardy's daring, but it came at a cost. His commitment to physical transformation, bulking up for Bane, adopting unrecognizable body language, sometimes left Nolan adjusting cinematography and sound design just to make the performance legible. For a director who prided himself on practical precision, Hardy's unpredictability was both exhilarating and exasperating. Still, Nolan stood by him. In interviews, he praised Hardy as one of the few actors capable of disappearing entirely, of creating characters so complete that they seemed untouchable. Yet privately, the friction lingered. Hardy's approach clashed with Nolan's desire for clean storytelling, where every word mattered. On set, the director reportedly reminded Hardy that an audience can only believe you if they can hear you. The irony is that Hardy's choices became part of the mythology. Bane's voice, mocked and debated, is now inseparable from the film's legacy. For Nolan, it was proof that difficulty could also breed unforgettable iconography. Working with Tom Hardy meant walking a fine line between brilliance and bafflement, clarity and confusion. And for Christopher Nolan, that balance was as daunting as any scene he put on screen. Number 3, Michael Caine. Michael Caine has been Nolan's most consistent collaborator, appearing in nearly every one of his films. But even loyalty carries friction. Caine's old-school instincts sometimes collided with Nolan's relentless demand for subtlety and realism. Stories circulated of Caine improvising or loosening lines in rehearsal, only to be met with Nolan's firm redirection. The affection between them was genuine, but so was the occasional clash of generations. Caine came of age in an era when actors were taught to command the screen, projecting presence and authority with every line. On Nolan's sets, however, subtlety was sacred. The director relied on silence, framing, and detail to convey meaning, asking actors to disappear into the story rather than dominate it. Crew members recalled moments where Caine leaned into theatrical flourishes, only for Nolan to cut and insist on restraint. Nolan once explained, "Michael comes from a school where performance fills the frame. I ask him to let the frame fill the performance." In The Prestige, Caine's cutter became the film's anchor, yet even there Nolan guided him toward understatement. The risk of overstatement, Nolan believed, was that it disrupted the fragile realism he built into every shot. For Caine, instinct sometimes pointed in the opposite direction, toward the grand tradition of actors whose presence alone carried a story. Despite these differences, Caine became indispensable. His roles often embodied the moral core: the loyal butler in the Dark Knight trilogy, the wise mentor in Inception, the aging scientist in Interstellar. Nolan once called him the heart that beats beneath the machinery of the film. Yet even that heart required adjustment, reshaped to fit Nolan's minimalist vision. Their bond endured precisely because it was tested. Caine softened his approach, Nolan allowed warmth, and together they carved out performances that resonated deeply. For Nolan, Michael Caine was more than a collaborator. He was living proof that even the closest partnerships in cinema demand negotiation, and that true respect is forged in the space where two traditions collide. Number 4, Anne Hathaway. Anne Hathaway's work in The Dark Knight Rises and Interstellar showed Nolan at his most ambitious with female characters. Yet, Hathaway's preparation-heavy process sometimes stretched against Nolan's stripped-down minimalist style. She trained for months in movement, fight choreography, and vocal inflection. Nolan valued her commitment, but he also grew impatient with rehearsal-heavy methods that slowed his relentless pace. To him, perfection lived in the take, not the workshop. Hathaway's approach was rooted in meticulous planning. For Selina Kyle, she studied cat-like movement, worked daily with stunt teams, and analyzed vocal tones until the role felt complete. Nolan admired the seriousness, but insiders noted his preference for instinct over endless preparation. He once remarked, "You can rehearse forever, but the truth only arrives when the camera rolls." That belief often clashed with Hathaway's desire to arrive on set with every detail mapped. On Interstellar, the tension deepened. Hathaway played Amelia Brand, a scientist torn between love and duty. Her preparation leaned heavily into emotional research, reading about astronauts, exploring themes of sacrifice, while Nolan insisted the emotion should emerge in the moment. Crew members recalled lengthy discussions where Hathaway sought clarity on lines, while Nolan pushed her to trust silence. The director prized spontaneity, believing over-rehearsal risked draining authenticity. Still, Hathaway's performances resonated. Her Selina Kyle balanced elegance with menace, and her monologues in Interstellar became touchstones of Nolan's filmography. Yet, the cost of those results was the push and pull between actress and director. In interviews, Hathaway admitted, "Chris never coddles you. He expects you to leap, and you either land or you don't." Their dynamic revealed a broader truth about Nolan's sets.
Oh, you don't seem happy to see me.
He sought actors willing to adapt to his rhythm, not bend him to theirs. Hathaway, with her rigorous preparation, tested that rule more than most. For Nolan, working with Anne Hathaway meant navigating discipline that mirrored his own, but arrived through different methods. It was respect, forged in friction, proving that even ambition can become its own battlefield. Number 5. Leonardo DiCaprio. Inception demanded an anchor, and Leonardo DiCaprio provided it. But with DiCaprio came an actor known for interrogating every line, every gesture, every motivation. Nolan, who thrived on his scripts being near sacred, found himself pushed into endless debates. DiCaprio's pursuit of emotional realism sometimes challenged Nolan's architectural vision. The result was magic on screen, but behind the camera, it was a battle of precision versus probing instinct. DiCaprio's reputation for deep research and analysis meant he rarely accepted dialogue at face value. He questioned subtext, rewrote backstory, and requested extended conversations about character psychology. For a director like Nolan, who favored tight structures, this could be exhausting. One crew member recalled, "Leo would stop a scene to ask what his character ate for breakfast that morning." Nolan once admitted, "Leo wanted to dig into every corner of his character's life. I wanted him to trust that the structure would carry him." In Inception, DiCaprio's Cobb was the emotional core of a film otherwise built like a puzzle box. Nolan designed the story as machinery, dreams within dreams, ticking clocks, layers of precision. DiCaprio, however, pushed the process toward grief, memory, and regret. The tension between those approaches shaped the performance. Nolan's frames demanded clarity, while DiCaprio fought to humanize them with vulnerability. At times, this led to delays. Insiders noted that Nolan, who disliked rehearsal, spent hours in discussions with DiCaprio, parsing motivations line by line. The director eventually admitted, "Leo forced me to think more emotionally about the story than I ever had." That push pulled Nolan out of pure architecture and into a rawer form of storytelling. The payoff was unforgettable. DiCaprio's intensity grounded the film's cerebral design in a heartbeat the audience could feel. Yet the process revealed just how difficult their collaboration could be. An actor unwilling to surrender control and a director unwilling to yield his blueprint. For Nolan, working with Leonardo DiCaprio was both a challenge and a revelation. Proof that sometimes conflict does not weaken the art, it sharpens it. Number 6. Cillian Murphy. Cillian Murphy has become Nolan's signature lead from Batman Begins to Oppenheimer. But their long collaboration has not been without friction. Murphy's quiet, inward energy could frustrate Nolan's need for clarity and externalization. On set, Nolan demanded projection and power, while Murphy often worked in whispers and restraint. Their bond was strong, but the tension between underplay and epic scope was always there, sharpening every performance. Murphy has always gravitated towards subtlety, choosing to play the spaces between words rather than the words themselves. That instinct created unforgettable moments, such as his hollow-eyed scarecrow in Batman Begins. But on larger productions, Nolan often pushed for volume and presence. One crew member recalled Murphy delivering a line so softly it barely registered on camera, prompting Nolan to remind him, "The silence is powerful, but only if the audience can still hear it.
At this point, they can't stop us. But the Batman...
The push and pull continued through Inception, where Murphy's Robert Fisher carried the emotional weight of a son's grief while also being a pawn in the film's intricate mechanics. Nolan emphasized precision, while Murphy leaned into fragility. At times, scenes were reset simply to capture a delivery that matched Nolan's demand for clarity. The director later admitted that Murphy's approach added layers he had not anticipated, but it also tested his patience on a schedule that allowed little room for endless refinement. By the time of Oppenheimer, their creative tension had become almost ritual. Nolan built the film around Murphy, yet still pushed him toward greater projection, knowing the role required the voice of a man who could both create and destroy worlds. Nolan once said, "Cillian has a gift for understatement, but sometimes understatement needs a megaphone."
The Communist Party of the United States was concerned with our domestic problems. I now no longer.
The result was extraordinary, a portrait of genius and guilt, conveyed through flickers of hesitation and bursts of intensity. Nolan may have demanded more volume, but Murphy's restraint made the louder moments hit like shockwaves. For Nolan, Cillian Murphy embodied the paradox of cinema, a whisper powerful enough to fill an IMAX screen. Their friction was not an obstacle. It was the very engine of trust. Number 7. Heath Ledger. Nolan called Heath Ledger's Joker in The Dark Knight the performance of a lifetime, yet filming it was a balancing act of chaos and control. Ledger's immersion in the character, staying in voice, experimenting with unpredictable gestures, was thrilling and unsettling.
Me? I was right here.
Nolan admired the brilliance, but he also wrestled with keeping the production steady. Ledger pushed the limits of method, and Nolan, who loathed excess, had to adapt his meticulous rhythm to one-man's storm. Ledger's Joker was born from experimentation. He arrived on set with notebooks filled with ideas, voices, and physical tics, many of which emerged in the moment rather than the script. For Nolan, who prized exactness, this was unnerving, but he recognized its power. In one interview, he admitted, "Heath would surprise us with something new in every take. It could throw you off balance, but it was always better than what you expected."
I'm gonna make this pencil disappear.
The unpredictability gave the Joker terrifying life. Crew members recalled Ledger improvising small movements, licking his lips, shifting posture, injecting menace into silence. Nolan often allowed him to run longer than planned, capturing whatever emerged. For a director known for precision, this willingness to bend showed rare flexibility. Yet, the intensity raised concern. Ledger's deep immersion led him to isolate himself between takes, remaining in character long after cameras stopped rolling. Nolan, protective of the production, monitored closely to ensure the chaos did not spiral. He later reflected, "Heath's energy was dangerous in the best sense of the word. It disrupted everything around it, and that's what made it true."
I don't want to kill you.
The clash of Bale's control and Ledger's chaos was precisely what Nolan needed, even if it challenged his instincts. Ledger's storm forced him to loosen the leash, to trust the raw force of a performance outside his usual methods. The result was unforgettable. Ledger's Joker redefined comic book villains and won him a posthumous Academy Award. For Nolan, it was a lesson that sometimes control must give way to madness, because in Ledger's chaos, cinema found one of its purest truths. Christopher Nolan's films are often remembered for scale, collapsing cities, bending time, detonating worlds. But behind the spectacle, the real challenge has always been human. Each actor brought genius, but also difficulty, testing his patience and his precision. And yet, it was in those clashes, between control and chaos, discipline and instinct, that Nolan's cinema found its heartbeat. These stories remind us that artistry is rarely smooth. It is carved through conflict, disagreement, even frustration. Great performances do not emerge from ease, but from the friction between competing visions. Nolan's journey proves that difficulty is not an obstacle to legacy. It is part of it. So, what do you think? Which of these actors reshaped Nolan's work the most? Share your thoughts below, and remember to like and subscribe for more stories behind the screen. Because in the end, conflict creates cinema.